Hello and welcome, friends. Welcome back to another Fearless Friday chat. I am so excited to be with you this morning or this afternoon or whenever you're watching this because I have two phenomenal guests. Both of them's names are Tony. I have Tony Patterson and I also have Tony Newton. But they are going to be sharing with you today on a topic that I find very interesting and relevant given what we're facing in our country right now, and that is race as it relates to church. And so they're going to be sharing from their experiences. We'll be having a conversation about what this means for us right now. We've been talking in previous conversations about George Floyd's death and a little bit of the Black Lives Matter movement, and then what that's meant for us as Americans and how we're moving forward, how faith has affected our response. And so today is just another opportunity for you to hear some stories of people who are experiencing life perhaps a little bit differently than you are. So again, without further ado, I want to share my guests with you. And we'll begin to talk about this very pertinent topic. So, what would you say in terms of moving forward? What do we do? I mean, because the church has not engaged. And Antonio, you mentioned it, you feel like they should be leading, especially the white evangelicals. So for those who are listening and wondering, well, what can I do or what should I do? What would you say to them?
Well, there are so many things, and it's like I said, it's a lot of ingredients in one mixing bowl. But I think the first thing you have to do is listen. Listen to what we are saying and try to see it from our perspective, and not look through the lens that you have always historically used, to view the situation. Because as long as you continue to do that, you're going to see the same thing. If I were to take off my glasses and put on a pair of, red tinted shades, I'm going to see everything in a red tinted view. I have to take those glasses off, and look through another lens in order to see things differently. And so that's the first thing. You have to listen. Um, you know, be quick to listen, slow to speak,
Mm-hmm.
process what's being said. You know, uh, don't run it through the process of your historical context or what you've always believed and always heard. You already see that that's not working.
Mm-hmm.
So listen. And then the other thing is then speak. This is like I tell my kids, you can't have a B in science and your dad's a science teacher. That just doesn't work. So I say to my white counterparts, you can't have all these unanswered questions and call me your friend. Because if I am truly your friend, then you can ask me questions and we can have this conversation. So you can't have a D, in racism, and not have somebody that you can ask questions and, in a non-confrontational way. Don't be afraid, you know, um, and it's those types of things. But then specifically dealing with the churches, again, pastors, leadership, you have to speak up, you have to speak out. You cannot let culture dictate what message comes across the pulpit. And that is why we have the problems with racism in the church as we do right now, is because pastors who know the truth have not spoken the truth. And pastors have to first speak that into their leadership. If you come from a larger church, like, where Tony goes, where you have, several lead pastors and other teaching pastors, you have to draw a line in the sand with your leadership first, because your leadership is who you send out there to be the face of your ministry, to teach your discipleship classes, teach your Sunday school classes, and you all have to be on the same page. So if you're a pastor who's saying, you know, I genuinely love black people, I don't think about black people the way the culture does. If you know that and your people don't know that, that's a problem.
Yes.
If that's only in your heart and it's never really come out of your mouth, that's a problem. And
Mhm.
it's a fear issue. It's a dependence issue. You're depending on racism. You're depending on what your people believe to feed your funds, or your tithes, or whatever that is. You got to get rid of that fear, and you have to trust God to say, I'm going to stand up on this issue. I'm going to speak truth to power, and I'm going to trust the Holy Spirit to lead me and guide me. And, I'm not going to fear losing church members. If I lose church members, then those are probably the ones I don't need anyway, because they're not going to change their minds about how they feel. And God's going to send me some people who feel like I feel, who can help me spread this message of the gospel. Because at the end of the day, there is one heaven. We are one Christian family. We have to learn to live together. So we have to have those deep conversations, and those conversations won't always be nice. We won't always be sitting in Starbucks with a cup of coffee or latte and having this nice conversation. It may get heated, but I'd rather have a heated conversation where truth can come out. We will know where we stand, and we can work some things out and have some reconciliation than to just keep avoiding speaking about it all. And that's what the church has done, because it's safe. It's easy. Well, you just pray about it and see what the Lord says. So we have to do that. And I think as one of, I put this on myself, is that, in times where I think I'm going to be, seen as being threatening, or, somebody's going to be fearful of their life, and then I change who I am to accommodate their feelings, I have to stop doing that. Yes. I have a bad habit of doing that. And it's self-preservation also. You learn that as a Black male. I have to be my true, authentic self and not pander to how people feel. It's not my job to make you feel safe. That's not my job. It's not my job to make you, feel like you're not threatened when you're in the same space with me. That's not my job. My job is to be my true, authentic self and let you deal with your own demons, and you have to come to light with that. And so, it makes me uncomfortable, and it makes me upset when I see somebody grab their child, and pull them close because they think I'm going to do something. So those are some things we have to do. I think, to say I have a Black friend is not enough. I'm not racist because I have a Black friend. That's not enough. That's not gonna cut it anymore. To say, well, I'm not racist because I went to a rally, that's not good enough either.
Why isn't that good enough? Talk about that. I have a Black friend. I'm a good person. Why are those things good enough?
If you know a person, you feel comfortable with that person, then okay, that's my friend. Tony's my friend. Well, Tony wasn't your friend before you had a conversation with him and you got to know him, So now that you know me, I'm one of the quote unquote good Black people.
Good ones.
You're one of the good ones. You're one of the educated ones. I like how you talk. I like how you dress. It's the other ones that I don't like. Well, let's deal with that then, because if you're a Christian, you have a duty to love that brother. If you see something that you think is not up to par, you have a duty to that brother to help him get where he needs to be in life. If you think he's a criminal or you think he's uneducated, what are you going to do to help him not be a criminal, or help him become educated, or help him get a job, or become a productive part of society? What are you going to do besides demean him, and put your thumb down on him and hold him down? So, those are some of the things. Educate yourself. Educate yourself. It's not Black people's job to educate you on Black history. That's not our job. We shouldn't have to tell you about the civil rights movement. We shouldn't have to tell you about all these other deaths. All of your history is in our face every day. And we call that American history. We are Americans too. So make our history just as important as your own. Read books, and I would go as far as to say, read books about Black people that are written by Black people. Because when you have a book written by another race, they get to control the narrative of what they say in that book. So, those are just a few things. There are so many things. I know we don't have time to discuss it all, but have those conversations. And I would say to my white brothers, sisters, any other race, if you know me, or Tony, or Chalessa, reach out to us. Don't sit on the sidelines and be silent because you don't know what to say, or you're scared you might say the wrong thing, or it may come across the wrong way. We want to hear from you. Because if we don't know how you're thinking, we don't know how to help you. So those are just a few of those things.
I I got to say this real fast because you hit on something when you were talking about, you're that good Black person, but if you see someone who is not fitting into that mold, why not exercise and use your Christianity to be the hands and feet of Jesus in that life space? And I think that might be what we're missing. And that's overall Black, white, Asian, Latino, Mexican, whatever,
Well,
finding ways to not make the assumption, but be the
right.
hands and feet of Jesus in that person's life.
Right, and I can see that, from my point of view, in the medical field,
Mm,
there are people who you would look at them and say, well, they're just not a healthy person. They just don't take care of themselves. They shouldn't live this way. But we don't know their financial situation. We don't know why they eat the way they do. We don't know, you know, um, what's going on in their lives that have caused them to be in the condition that they're in. So it's not our job to judge them. It's our job to love them and treat them and give them medical attention. If a person is overweight, I don't know why they're overweight. My job is to
mm,
treat them. They have a condition. They don't need me to judge them. They need me to help them. And so
mm.
we need to carry that message across the church. And that's what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be the hands and feet of Jesus. If the least racist place in the world should be the church, and it's not. The
Tony,
least judgmental place in the world should be the church, and it's not. You know, the place that should be the hands and feet and reach out the most should be the church. And it's not. If we see, yeah, you're digging wells in other countries, that's great. And yes, you're sending food to other countries, that's wonderful. And you're feeding families for $1 a day, that's great. But we have so much stuff going on right here under our nose that we don't deal with. I think we use that as deflection from this. You know, we're using our missions that we're doing in other places to deflect from the problems that we have right here. I put a post the other day. We say we're the best country in the world. But if you're comparing yourself to countries that are making the C's and D's or D's and F's, and you're the C country, you're calling yourself the best, but you're mediocre at best. And I think in race relations, we are probably a D or an F, but we tout ourselves as the best country in the world. We're supposed to be the moral authority for other countries, you know. And so, there's so much work that we have to do in the church. It starts with the pastors, goes down to the people. Talk to people, talk to your friends. I don't need my white friends to go to a Black church and say how much you love Black people. I need my white friends at your white church to say how much you love Black people, and let that conversation start there.
yeah, Tony, you were about to talk about exhaustion. So for, I know a lot of perhaps the white churches, white pastors, white leadership, they might find themselves growing tired of the dialogue. What what would you say to them to tell them, look, it's still very much pertinent and important, push through the exhaustion? What would you share with them?
Well, my moving forward, I guess I know time is away from us, but I would just say, like what Tony said, there's people that'll come up to you and say, well, that are in power position. They'll be like, well, I'm not. Well, if you're not telling your people, then it's not doing anything for anybody. It's just helping you feel better because you've convinced the Black guy to at least see you as okay, you
Mm,
know. And they think that's some kind of compliment or whatever. But like you said, I love what you said about being the hands and feet, and you don't know people's situations, but some of us, so many of us, even as Christians, don't put ourselves in situations where we can know anything else. And like Tony said, when he's talking about his glasses and stuff, I tell people this all the time. They will go ask their white friend that knows nothing about Black people, but that's who they go and ask about Black people. So they have this whole discussion about what Black people's problems are, or what Hispanic people's problems are, without actually talking to or knowing someone. And the one time they do cross, like somebody like me's path or whatever, then you're labeled the good one,
mm,
because and we, like we said, we learn better as we go on. Back 20 years ago, people were just kind of they say it and you know what they mean and you feel bad about it. But now we are trying to show that's not good, because they thought they were giving you a compliment back then. And so all these people that are like, where's all this coming from? It's all coming from up now. No, it's progress has been made, so you have opportunities to speak out about some of these things more than you ever did in history. So there's a lot coming out. And so instead of looking at it like, oh, I thought we were past all this, we never were past all of it. You never dealt with it all those years before. And so then people are like, well, they want something. Well, I worked. I didn't have to do anything. I pulled myself up from my bootstraps. I always say, I can't pull myself up from my bootstraps if you stole my boots. How much sense is that? But that's everybody's solution for us. And it's almost insulting when immigrants from Italy, Germany, China, Japan, telling us we should just leave if we don't like it. And it's like, well, the Native Americans probably want to have a conversation with you about that. So we have an interesting way of rewriting things and changing the narratives to fit what we don't want to deal with. And so for churches, like you said, one thing Tony said was, I don't need my white friends to go to a black church. Like now we actually go to a predominantly black church. And I always make it clear, I didn't go there because it was a predominantly black church. And just situations over life changed, and I felt led to. My wife's not black. And so I just went to where I was led to go. And that's all I've ever done. But like you said, when you don't know people's stories, you make all these assumptions and come up with your own narrative about them. Nobody ever asked me why, even when I was in a multicultural church. Nobody ever asked me why I go. It was, why are you not in the black church? Or why are you not, now you're over there, why are you not over here? And so there's always all that going on and swirling around, and nobody ever just asks you. Now for me, my heart of hearts is multicultural, and not just for the term and what it means today. It's just because I love all kinds of people. I have placed myself where my friends are diverse and on purpose. And I love other cultures and learning from other cultures. And I feel like it's just made me just a better person in life. So when I encounter people, I don't come with the preconceived about their whole race. I'm just meeting them based on who they are, and then I want to know them even better. And like Tony said, too many churches are just not doing it. And we know we're not doing it. And we're all sitting around having, 10 committees talking about, I wonder what the problem is. I just don't understand what's going on. Well, yeah, you do. We could have ended this meeting in 2 minutes by simple stuff. Get outside these 4 walls and know people. Bring people to your church. Not when it's the black choir that's visiting. If your leadership and you're sitting around listening to just people that look like you, you're never going to learn anything. Even in the Bible, there's different races of people, but we don't talk about that. It's like if you find yourself getting more upset when somebody refers to Jesus as not white, you have a problem. Because it defeats the purpose and the point of what they're trying to teach you. But you're wrapped up in your idols. You're caught up in whether it's the flag, whether it's your real problem is black people, what you think of them. That's your real problem. Now you mask it between how could they kneel and how could they do? A white man told them to do that, but they don't want to talk about that. And so I love all people, but I understand why people say Black Lives Matter. I understand that. And so somebody had said to me one time, they were like, well, why is there a black entertainment channel? Black, if white people did that. And I said, you do. I said, it's ABC, CNBC, CNN, MSNBC, CBS, Fox. So I ran down all these channels. I was like, you see your culture every day. I said, black people, or whether it's Univision, Latin, American people, they didn't start those because they just want to be separate. They started them because nobody was telling their stories. Nobody was showing their heroes, the things they like, the things they deem important. To y'all, what y'all show is our hair's the butt of all your jokes, our skin color's the butt of all your jokes. We're always the bad guy. We're always a gang member in your stories. We're always a thug in your stories. We're always the criminal in your stories. And you're always the hero. So you start seeing all these stories done by us. It's for us, but it's also to show you. That's why, you know, we had the anniversary of the Tulsa race riots and stuff. I know in our production area, there was like 40 people out there. One of them had ever even heard of it, knew nothing about it. And so there's been a lot being exposed. And honestly, I believe God is digging up that ground and digging up these last strongholds that we have held on to for so long, and watching us give lip service to so many things we're not doing. Mm-hmm. And so because I'm not talking about abortion every day, doesn't mean I don't care about that. But we talk about racism. I tell people all the time, you have nothing I want. I earn everything, but give me the opportunity. And then people say, well, why we say for Black people to, you know, white people to speak up, and why we need them to speak up, because they're not listening to us. We've been saying it for years. They don't listen to us. So to hear you with some weight in their lives and some, you know, stature in their lives to say it, that's what gets their attention. You know, we recently went to the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, and I seeing the wall of all the people arrested. And there was white, Black, you know, and that doesn't get talked about as much, how many white people came alongside Black people that saw that it was wrong and was willing to be called into action and lost their lives fighting alongside of us. Mm-hmm. And that's what it's about. So then it becomes, well, why are y'all getting special treatment? Why do y'all want this and that? We have been denied it all this time. No other race has been, I mean, there's been the Holocaust and all this, and that's true. But no race has been enslaved their entire, and I used the Tulsa race riots. I said, think about it like this. It was a thriving community, businesses, land that they earned, and then jealousy of a group of white people. And so it wasn't just the Klan that came in, it was the Klan members that are officers, police officers, government officials, legislators, come in, burn it all to the ground, strip families of their husbands and wives and children. And imagine, I said, imagine you have no recourse. You can't just go down to the bank and get another loan and rebuild. You literally have nowhere to go. The earner in your family, what if it's the husband? He's the only earner. He's dead, or you don't even know where he is. So your wife's left with kids and you don't have any recourse. You have no food, no clothes, your own earned stuff. And they leave you. Then they take your land, take your farms, and you're left with nothing. But nobody wants to talk about that. And so then we see these ghettos and these inner city places, and they're like, oh, so these Black people are just so, you cage people for so long, the redlining and how districts are redrawn to keep money out of those schools, to keep money out of those neighborhoods. The same money you're giving to other people and to white neighborhoods and building better schools, paying teachers better, building up, but they don't want to talk about that. Well, you should all be able to do the same thing. And we can't even count on in some of our areas to have clean drinking water. For years now, nobody's dealing with that. But you want to, as a white Christian, come and talk to me about abortion for the next 20 years. And we just silo and pick and choose as Christians what we want to focus on. And then, well, let's go to heaven. It doesn't work like that. It didn't work like that when Jesus walked here. He got in situations with the woman at the well. His own disciples were like, don't talk to her. You're not supposed to be talking to her. You're not supposed to be dealing with her. And he got in there and dealt with her because he saw the value in her. He didn't see it in her past. He knew she had been with a lot of men. He knew. But what's the first thing they do with Black people? Well, their past and what they did. And oh boy, they can't do, oh yeah. Total contrary to the gospel of Christ. But yet with George Floyd, Armand, it was always, let's dig up their past and find that thing that criminalize them and dehumanize them. But yet, if it's a white person, we should be praying for their second chance and giving them a second chance. And there's never a shortage of white ministers, if there's a white celebrity, to come alongside of them and lift them back up. And how many of you have seen that are back on TV, back on businesses, back leading companies, have multiple companies, TV show, everything else? You see it all the time. But with us, it's harder because they will hold that against you the rest of your life. So that's the difference. It doesn't happen in every place, but it's enough of a problem we have to stop acting like it's not. And so they'll see me as a good one, but they don't have any idea the stuff I go through every day just to be in those white spaces where you can't just be everybody else and you can't just speak up. So then you're labeled, oh, well, this all has been stuff that said to me, well, Tony doesn't speak up, he's not assertive, and well, he doesn't. And you're going, if you knew me and talked to me, you understand what my reservations for doing that is, and stop. But that will keep you out of a promotion and keep you out of a job because of their perception of you as a Black man. But nobody wants to have that conversation. And Christians continue to do it. And I feel sometimes, as Black people, we're drawing more within ourselves because you start feeling like, I'm all I got. I'm all I got. And so then the white people are like, well, they're fine over there. We'll pay some money to that little Black church, to keep them afloat over there. We'll let the Hispanic people use our church later this afternoon. Don't bring them in here with us so we can all learn and grow together. Well, we're used to doing that because it's comfortable. It's easy. We got to stop doing easy as Christians. And if we're going to be true followers of Christ, and if you notice all this George Floyd stuff out there, I noticed on social media how many of these strong Christian people stopped talking about Christ. They ain't even talking about it no more now. Right. They're talking about the government. They're talking about Trump. They're talking about the economy. They're talking about abortion. They're talking about what's wrong with Black folks. They ain't even talking about the gospel no more. And I said, that's what saddens me, is the gospel is not even being discussed anymore. Yeah. They're not saying, oh, I need to stop and use Jesus' example.
Is there something, in you all's opinion, that churches can do to help facilitate more of those genuine conversations? Because you said it right. It's in the heart, Holy Spirit laying it on someone's heart that you need to adjust or work on this area.
I think the main thing is be intentional. Don't just take for granted that it's going to happen. Yeah. Because it's a hot topic right now and it's a hashtag and it's trending. You have to be intentional about having these discussions in your church, in your sanctuary. Stream it if you need to. Make it known, just like if you're going to have a big program at church, you would put it out there. You'd have flyers and it'd be on Facebook. Make it known, hey, we're going to come into the sanctuary, or we're going to be on Zoom, and we're going to have a frank discussion about race, not just in the church, but in this church. I'm not talking about the churches in our city, or I'm talking about, as a pastor in my church, I want to talk to you as a congregation about race and be intentional about it. And as you can't go in and force how you feel on people. You still have to listen to their stories, because you're always going to have, I can't think of the lady's name. She was the cook that made the racial statement not too long ago, and she lost her business. Oh goodness, I can't think of her name. But her thing was, that's where I was raised in the South. That's what I grew up around. So I was just used to talking like that. And for me, it was a joke. But I see that it was racial. Well, at some point I can understand that. You were born in the 30s or 40s, and that's how people talked, and that's the culture that you lived in. But as a pastor, just because that is the way it is in your church, you cannot let that take the precedent. You can't let that be the precedent. So you have to be intentional and just straight up say, tonight's Bible study is going to be about racism. And I want you to be there. We're going to be on Zoom. I want you to tune in. We need to have a discussion because this is real. And then encourage that, especially for churches that have small groups. That is a powerful thing. if you can use small groups to facilitate that, and you may not have a lot of Black families, but you know, if you're going to have small groups, invite one of our African American families to your small group, because in most multicultural churches, you get in a small group and they divide themselves out by culture.
Mm.
You know, so you have the 5 or 10% Black in that church, and you have 2 small groups out of that family. Well, let's not do that. Let's mix it up. Let's do this on purpose so that we can have this conversation, because we don't, you know, we don't need a lot of Black people sitting around in a circle talking about white people. We don't need a lot of white people in a circle talking about Black people. We need to have a conversation, you know. And so as a leadership, I think pastors also need to reach out to other pastors of different races and talk to them and see what's going on in their churches, because you can't take for granted that the pastor over at this Black church is not having some of the same issues that you're having at your church, you know. So you got to reach across the lines, and you have to be intentional about it, and don't let fear drive your decisions. And I say that specifically to pastors. don't don't be driven by fear, because I think fear is the reason why we've been having these issues for so long, is we've been afraid to discuss it. We've been afraid of, you know, if I preach about racism this Sunday, what is the congregation going to look like next Sunday? You know, and you may have to do a series, you know. And some pastors, and I think this would be detrimental, especially if you're a white pastor and you'll say, well, what I want to do, I want to have a Black pastor come and talk to my congregation. That may not be the right thing to do right now. Because what it's going to look like is you're avoiding you speaking out.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's just like the Barack Obama. We had a Black president. Well, we're having these race issues. I brought in a Black speaker. So you don't want to do that. It's your voice as a leader that needs to be heard. And, you know, you get feedback from your people. You know, you always want to do some kind of a survey to see whether they really learned something, and if there's something they disagreed with, something that they thought you should have mentioned, but you didn't, because that's a part of the listening process. And then you take that back again. So it cannot be, you know, a one Wednesday night, you know, it may have to be long term, because this is a deep rooted issue. You know, like Tony said, you can't keep dealing with the branches and not deal with the root. You know, if in your heart, because this is what racism is, it's not just that you don't like Black people or that you don't like people of a different color. Racism is in your heart, you feel like you are superior to other people. That's the root of it. It's an idea. And I remember Miles Monroe saying that the reason you can't kill racism is because you can't kill an idea. Racism is an ideology, is what it is. And so because you can't kill the idea, you can't kill the ism. So you have to deal with the idea. That idea is flawed. There, you know, even when we teach about God's chosen people, the children of Israel, we teach that so wrong. We teach that is God chose these people, and you can't do anything to them, because if you mess with them, you're messing with God, and God's going to protect them, and he's going to keep them, and he chose them because they're better than anybody. And that's not true. That's not the truth of the gospel. Look at their story. They were enslaved. So, you know, that couldn't be the truth. God chose them as an example of what he will do with any people who came to worship him. You know, they turned their backs on God. They got into trouble. God was merciful. He brought them out. No different than what we have today. So when we teach that the children of Israel, God's chosen people, were superior to all other people, that's not even the truth of the gospel. But that lends itself to the idea of racism. Well, if God could choose those people, then he chose us, you know, as white people. And so pastors have to deal with how they teach theology from the pulpit, because how you teach theology relates to people's ideology. And that creates ideas. The idea that they get from that is there can be a group of people who are superior to others. And that was not God's intent when he chose the children of Israel. So, you know, it's deep rooted. It takes a lot of teaching. You can't just have one conversation or a Bible study. You can't even do a 3-part series on racism in your church and think that you're going to end this problem. You know, it's in families, it's in homes, it's on jobs, it's, you know, it's systemic, unfortunately, the church has become a part of that system, and it's systemic in the church. And
Mhm.
so you see it. I would rather, some pastors would rather help a black pastor start his own church
Yeah.
than to bring that pastor on to be equal with them in ministry at their church.
Yeah.
So it's separate but equal. That works for me. I'd rather do that. I'd rather spend the money to help you build a physical church to keep you over there than to deal with the issue of having to have us come together and do ministry together in our church. And then we can do some little things like, we'll switch pulpits one Sunday. You preach in my church, I'll preach at your church, and then we go back. So we don't want to go back to the norm. So let's be intentional as leaders about bringing up the topic. Let's not walk in fear, and then let's really teach a more introspective theology. In a theology that looks inward. What
Mhm.
do I really believe about the Bible, and what shadow do I cast on my people when I teach that from the pulpit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the question that comes up while you said that, especially the example about the white pastor helping the black pastor start his own churches, I could just hear the question in someone's mind, well, what's wrong with that? I'm helping them
Yeah.
establish their own company, establish their own business. What could my conversation be, or what should it have been? Or what if that black pastor just wants to leave? So could you address that a little bit, that type of question?
Well, I think it's still, um, as Tony said, we have to avoid the easy,
Mm,
and it's the easy
Hmm.
because number one, it looks good. It's philanthropy to to some degree. I'm helping somebody who is inferior to me start their own. So I'm saving them in some sense, you
Mm.
know. Um, and then we have to address the other side. As Black people, we have to be intentional about our spaces that we navigate. We have to get out of our box of protectionism, you know, and go into those spaces also. So I can't be the Black pastor that accepts that and says, okay, yeah, in order for you to be comfortable over there and me to be comfortable over here, I'll take your help and just go over there and be separated, because that perpetuates what's already going on. Because what we really need to do is to come together. Are we going to have cultural differences? Yes. Most pastors think they have a multicultural church. They don't. They have a
Like,
white church with some Black people and some brown people, but the
yes.
culture of your church is
Yeah.
white.
Yeah.
mm,
You have some Black musicians and you have some Black singers, but the culture of your church is still white. You do not have a multicultural, blended culture church.
Yeah.
You have a church that is run by how you were raised and how you feel and how you think. And people have to come to your church and assimilate to that culture in order to be accepted in your church. And that's the truth about it. So as long as we keep having these separate churches, we continue to perpetuate the problem that is there, and it's easy to do that.
mm-hmm,
So we have to avoid that easy thing. It would have been easy for, Jesus not to tell Zacchaeus to come out of the tree, or just talk to Zacchaeus outside under the tree. But no, he went to Zacchaeus's house. That wasn't an easy thing to do, because he already knew what they were going to say.
mm,
He knows that this man is stealing money. you know, he knows what this man does for a living, and he's still going to go there anyway. So if we're going to do what Jesus did, then we have to get in that space. We have to go to Zacchaeus' house and have that conversation with him. And what happened was Jesus didn't have to talk much, because Zacchaeus started seeing his own ways, just like the insurance agent in Tony's situation.
Mhm.
Zacchaeus started dealing with his own heart when he was in the presence of Jesus, and he changed himself. And he gave reparations. he, he said, everything that I stole, I'll give it back fourfold, you know. And so I think, if we do the easy thing, what's been happening for 200 years will go on for the next 200 years.
mm,
So we have to come together. We have to be in the same space. We have to have this conversation. And I go back to that word intentionality. It has to be intentional. You know, I'm not bringing you here so you can get acclimated to the church and then we see how things work out. No, I'm bringing you here because we need to have a conversation.
mm-hmm,
Point blank. That's the reason why you're here. We're here because we need to talk about racism. You know, we're not here to see how this is going to work. You know, we're not here so we can shake hands and, you know, show that even though we're pastors of a different color, or different brothers from a different mother, you know, that we can get along. We're here because there are some deep rooted problems in our churches, both black and white.
Mhm.
God does not want us separated because that's not his spirit, you know. And is it wrong to have a white church? No. Is it wrong to have a black church? No. But is it wrong to have those churches based on fear and based on culture? Yes.
Mm.
Mm.
I love that example about Zacchaeus, because what I heard in that was that when Jesus put himself in that space, so again, as we stop making assumptions and decide to take on what people may say, because it's the right thing to do to go into somebody else's space and be the hands and feet of Jesus. Jesus
Right.
didn't even have to say very much. Why? Because he carried the presence. We can carry the presence of God. We have that spirit of love upon us that will cause transformative change when we intentionally, like you said, go into these spaces that heretofore perhaps we've made wrong assumptions about. I don't know about that person. I might have even been trained, like the lady that lost her job, to think a certain way, to do a certain thing, but relook at myself, come out of myself, and begin to just share the love of Christ, because he
Right.
is the difference. And so, Tony, I wanted to ask you what encouragement, because this has been heavy. I mean, I've been my conscious and awareness has been raised, and I know many of the people who are listening are hearing some things for the first time. And so, for those white, black, or otherwise who have learned something or heard something that they want to do something about, what would you say just to encourage them not to be frustrated, or not to even be upset or offended, but to know, you know, you can move forward. There are steps to take, and this is a big thing, but be encouraged. What would be your word to them?
If you've taken the time to listen to this, as well as some of the other ones, that's good. That's a good first step if that is your first step. And like Tony said, it came to mind as soon as he said it, I was thinking the same thing actually. Intentional, being intentional. And you know, who knows in your heart what it's going to take for you to get to that point where you know you need to do it. The gospel should be enough. Just the gospel that you believe in should be enough to get
Right.
you to act. Because Jesus could have came down out that cross and been like, I know these people and they ain't worth dying for, you know? And he could have took himself out the situation knowing
Right.
that I got some criminals around me and some future criminals in the future and whatever else. He could have done all of that. But if he felt like we were worth fighting for, then black people are worth listening to. So I would say be intentional. If you're not comfortable, there's nobody around you to talk to, try reading some stuff. Like Tony said, there's not a white author telling you about the situation. And there's some great stuff out there written by some of those people, but the challenge for you is to start listening to those voices you've been afraid to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at those faces, whether it's watching something, reading something that you can start with to let's say some black person said something. They said, well, this is a problem. This is a problem. Well, instead of just being mad about it, go look up, do some research about what they were saying. Find out that truth. Don't go to your local politician or your pastor that don't know two black people. Don't convince your pastor to bring in a black choir this week, you know, and you all had a foot stomping, you know, and then they out the door and you're back to the normal stuff. That's not changing anything. If you're a business owner or whatever, you have to stop being comfortable with, well, we did this, you know, in my own company, we started diversifying the models and stuff because we used, you know, when I first, it was like white model, white model, white model, and it'd be like sprinkle of one or two black people, you know, and it's like, I remember just saying in a meeting one day, I was like, we have to be careful. We're not telling the story that all Christians are white, because that's what it looks like. People will perceive it like that. And if they don't even purposely perceive it that way, they're thinking it. And that's what they'll be conditioned to believe. And so, and also with the churches and stuff, we have to stop this. Well, you can't get the word in a black church, you know, or you can only get it in this prestigious white church, you know, is when the real gospel's preached. I've had people use that, you know, my wife and I get married. I know there was people who would go to this church, the big mega white church in the area. Go there because you'll hear the word. And none of that stuff's true. but that's what we teach. And I always think for other races, whether you're Asian, Hispanic, some of them will feel, well, it's always about black and white. It's always about black and white. Here's the thing. Black people have spent years fighting and trying to stand up and speak out. A lot of them are still in that whole, well, I got to keep the white people happy because I don't want them mad at me like they are with the black people. They're watching that going, and so then they're saying, yeah, y'all should just be quiet. Y'all should just be quiet because, well, the issues that racism that's done to Asian people, racism that's done to Hispanic people, stand up and speak out about it. Don't wait to DACA. Don't wait till kids are locked up in cages. Stand up now. What are you waiting on? Instead of being angry or resentful to us for saying so much and being so vocal. The changes that happen because of black people helps all of y'all, whether you know it or appreciate it or not. And so the counter to that is, instead of not, if you find yourself where it's hard for you to listen to, don't go find the nearest black video that you think is going to speak to your point instead of listening. You're going to go find Candace Owens, Hodge twins, or, some of this stuff. I see Asian people doing that. They're pulling out those videos. White people pulling out those videos. Hispanic people pulling out those videos instead of talking to people and knowing people. And I see that, and that just disappoints me over and over. So I'm like, move forward by knowing people, because you're still doing the root, you're still doing the branches by throwing out these videos of these black people saying the same thing. As Tony said earlier, every race has its ills in that race. For some reason, ours gets highlighted more, and they want to show that more. And it's a deflection point. It's deflection. That's all it is, because that root is still sitting there that they don't want to deal with. And it's like an injury or a sore. You start picking at it, it's going to hurt. So what's our first reaction? Pull away. So when I see all that, it's like, oh, Candace Owens said, the Hodge twins said, this person, Ben Carson said, and that's supposed to represent all of us. And that's what they do, and they're quite satisfied. But every generation, whether it's civil rights, I'm sure there was something back then with MLK. It was like, well, he had some affairs, and it's like anything. So right now, it's parading these folks out as speaking for us instead of doing the work of talking to the people. And somebody posted the other day about MLK and something. I said, well, yeah, right now y'all love MLK, and some of y'all have gotten to where, like little turtles, you stick your head out of there just a little bit, like, oh, I'm gonna put up an MLK quote to show that I'm okay, and it's like, then you go the rest of the year with the same stuff. And it's like, but do you think they loved MLK then? Mm. How many threatening phone calls his wife and kids got when they were at home alone? Threats of their life, bombing their house, burning crosses in their yard, doing all that stuff. That's the stuff y'all don't talk about. Y'all got the glamorized, finished legacy version of MLK. And that's nice that you recognize all that. But if that doesn't lead you to action, it's pointless. Like Tony said, paying a church, making it okay to just, well, I'll fund your church over here so y'all can stay over there. That's great, to have black church, white church, or whatever. But if the root of why you're doing it is you don't want to deal with that race problem, that's the problem. Mm-hmm. And so I remember people said with Obama, I've never, more white Christians say this that I hear a lot, because I'm in these circles and I hear it all the time. Well, boy, with Obama, there wasn't any race problem before Obama. That's what people actually say. It's like, well, no, what it actually was you put a black face in front of you that has all the power in the world, that's going to stir up some stuff. Right. So he's talking about things y'all never want to talk about and you don't want to deal with. Y'all are saying stuff from your pulpits against this man and not applying the gospel. And I said back then, when this man gets out of office and another white person gets in, all of a sudden we're going to go back to the scriptures. Give him a chance. And the Bible says, and and like clockwork, it never failed. We went straight back to that. And then we started saying, he's a Christian. He said, he didn't talk like a Christian, don't act like a Christian, well, you know, it's rough around the edge. Well, you know, and it's like, but he's a Christian. Well, you know, politicians do whatever it takes to achieve certain goals, and they will use Christians and whoever else to do it. And that's what you're seeing. But this idea that, oh, race was always here, is just when you put a black man in charge, that's going to stir up some stuff. And that's going to cause a lot of resentments and all. So this idea that, well, it never was a problem before him, and Jemima's always been there. All these other situations have always been there. But we start now looking at the history of where they come from. And so people are like, well, I just love Sarah. It's just like that imagery, blackface, all these things. Well, rappers say this and rappers do this and da da da. Again, they do not represent all of us. And I've said this to my white friends. I said, what if we connected you with every Klan member out there and said, you're all Klan members because those Klan members are doing this? You wouldn't feel like that's fair. So why do you do it to us? So intentionally know people, get to know people. The churches, speak out from the heart and from the true word coming out of your mouth, and not be afraid of if your offering plate's going to get filled this week, if you're going to have a job this week, or if your buddy's going to invite you to coffee next week in their house. Tell the truth and then call them to action. You know, and so don't get them to go sign up for another African kid or go do something like, you know, invite somebody to your house, not down the street, bring them to your house, talk to them, ask those hard questions. And us as Black people, we have to give them space to make mistakes in what they ask and terminology they may use. I purposely try to do that because people say stuff to me and I'm like, well, I remember a lady I used to work for, you know, and she used to say, you know, colored, and she's, you know, in her 60s, but I knew her. And I know times when my family, and she helped my family and stuff. And we had those conversations. And we always used, my wife and I would say, we know her and we know she is totally not trying to be offended. That's just all she knew. But I over time working with her, she always tried to get better and understand what should happen, you know? So we have to allow those people to be that. So when somebody does genuinely come to me or call me or message me like they've been doing, I really try to answer them with truth, because I keep thinking, man, if I can tell them the truth and they're listening to me, they're willing to actually ask me the question, not go around here to the corner to my white coworker and ask them what Tony's problem is or why he's quiet and all that stuff, but actually talk to me and not be, is he angry? Is he going to be angry? White people is passionate. Black people is angry. So we have a lot of work to do, but start with those things first.
I have really enjoyed this conversation. So much has been said. I'll give you guys a quick minute if there's any last point. But tell the people who are listening how they can reach out to you. I know that, you know, you have business. Tony Newton, you mentioned you have your own business. I know Antonio has his own business of things that he's doing. So if people want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Well, I'm on social media, of course, Antonio Patterson on Facebook, Antonio Patterson Pre-Med on Instagram and YouTube. And you can reach out to me there. Send me a message on Messenger or DM me on Instagram, ask a question. Or if you want to have a conversation, you know, let's exchange information and we can get on the phone and talk to one another. Let's share some ideas. But by all means, let's move forward. And also, you know, if you, another person out there, you're a different race than I am, and you know, you heard something that I said tonight or that was said here, and you just don't really understand where we're coming from, because you may not. We take for granted that you do, but you may not. Don't be afraid to ask a question. You know, I always say, you know, the only dumb question is a question that you don't ask. So ask the question, but don't ask the question with a preconceived answer in your head. So reach out to me. I'm always available.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very good. I'm online, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all those, LinkedIn, just Tony Newton. My business thing is Greener Pastures Design and Photography. That's on there. So you can always, same thing as Tony said, reach out, and ask questions. But I love what he said about not coming with preconceived ideas, or you don't like something. You may not understand things I said or where they exactly come from, or you disagree even. And that's all fine. That's why we talk in dialogue. But please don't be flipping through your stores right now and how many ways you gonna check me when you reach out to me and all that kind of stuff. It's just like, got your rebuttal ready, and all that, and your boxing gloves on in the video when we talking. Just have the conversation. Just I'll be perfectly willing to talk to you and point you to some resources and stuff that will really help explain stuff better than I did, because there's a lot of truth yet to be discovered out there by a lot of you if you really looked into it. And you can start talking to your household and then your church and maybe on your job and stuff, and not give in to the fear, because we have a gospel to preach and reach people, and too many things have been caused, and too much harm has been caused by fear. The fear of the other, the fear of this, the fear of that. And we just give into it without understanding that so many times once you have the conversation, the fear wasn't even anything that was even real in the first place. So give yourself a chance to become a better person, not just for Black people, but for yourself and for all people. So when you counter other people, you can bless other people from simply how you treated them. You treated them like you treated them as an equal. That blessing spreads.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this talk that I have every Friday is called Fearless Friday Chats, because I find that fear drives so many of our decisions, of our conversations. It limits our dreams and our aspirations. And you saw it linked throughout our conversation, even how fear shows up when we talk about racial issues and when we talk about specifically race in the church. And so I hope those of you who are listening, those of you who are viewing, will take what these gentlemen have shared with you. I hope also that the message of Christ has shown through in terms of how we can help transform the life of someone else by embodying the Spirit and allowing ourselves to be genuinely led by Holy Spirit in terms of how we engage with one another, and to dispel that fear, because many times, just like Tony said, it's something we really didn't have to be afraid of anyway. But I pray that you will be challenged and encouraged to nip fear in the bud. Just do it in spite of fear. Be brave. That's what we call bravery, and being courageous is acting in spite of the fears that we fear and that we feel and experience every day. So I want to thank these gentlemen again for coming on with me. We'll do this probably in a 2-part session, but you guys have given us certainly so very much to consider. Our hearts are heavy, and many of our hearts are grieved because of what you experience in America that many of us can't even relate to. And the fact that you have to talk to your children in a certain way to prepare them for what they will one day go out and become a part of. So thank you for sharing your truth. That was an excellent point, being our true selves so that we can all come together and better understand one another. And so on that note, I'm going to say thank you to you who are listening. Thank you to Antonio and to Tony. You guys have any quick God bless you or last scripture or whatever? Are you good?
I'm
good. I'm just hungry. That's all.
Well, I always like to say, the scripture says in Romans 8:28, says all things work together for those who love the Lord, those who are called according to his purpose. And I believe that is all of us. So even though things look bad right now, I believe that there's something greater behind it, and it's all going to work together for our good.
Amen.
Thank you for having us tonight. I appreciate you.
Yes. Thank you for the invite. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing the rest of you next Friday for another Fearless Friday chat.